Oil is one of the most valuable resources on the face of this planet. It has been the motivation behind wars, and it powers a decent amount of our daily lives. But how much are we willing to risk to get it? Offshore drilling is one method of extracting oil. Through the research that I've done, I've come to the opinion that offshore drilling is dangerous and harmful and should not be allowed on our coasts. It threatens humans and wildlife, and there needs to be action taken to restrict offshore drilling. So, offshore drilling really came to the light of the public in the year 1969 due to the Santa Barbara oil spill. It was the first major oil disaster in California and the largest at the time. This map above was a map that was on the LA Times and was produced by NOAA. And as you can see, it depicts the range of the spill. And over 3 million gallons were spilled into that area between Goleta and Ventura County. The other effects that it had was it was reported that waves broke silently due to the oil in the water, and that dead marine life washed up with the tide. It caught national attention and attention from the president. President Richard Nixon was quoted saying that this incident has frankly touched the conscience of the American people, and according to Shelby Grand in an article titled "The Environmental Disaster That Changed California" in the LA Times, reported that this event started a movement. That same year, the President Richard Nixon signed into effect NEPA, which required environmental impact reports to be done, and a year later, CEQA was signed as well. And CEQA is basically just California's version of what NEPA is, and NEPA is the National Environmental Protection Agency. So, another event that happened the next event you guys are probably a little bit more familiar with would be the BP spill, which happened in 2010. And this image is from the New York Times article by Coral Davenport. And this event had some very long reaching impacts. 10 people were killed and 17 people were injured, along with millions of gallons of crude oil being put into our ocean. Research done by C.H. Ainsworth and others in a 2018 article titled "Impacts of the Deepwater Horizon Oil Spill," evaluated using end-to-end ecosystem model, found that biomasses in fish decreased up to 70%, and in the least cases, it decreased by 30%. And he also found that it would be a 30-plus year time for recovery for the environment and the habitats in that area. So, how exactly does oil harm organisms that it is, or organisms in the area that it has spilled? There are three main ways, according to an article, "Oil Spill Effects on Marine Life and Wildlife," published by the Environmental Pollution Center. One way, as depicted above, would be direct contact, and direct contact happens through ingestion, inhalation, skin absorption, and or injection. Injection would happen if the organism had a cut or scrape on them and the oil were to get into the blood flow that way. And direct contact can lead to damage to behavior and reproductive systems in all organisms, including humans. More research by Francisco Aguilera in 2010, in the article titled "Review of the Effects of Exposure to Spilled Oils on Human Health," revealed that oil can affect or can lead to defects in human DNA, and also within the first couple of days lead to headaches, irritation of the eyes, and and irritation of the throat. The other ways that organisms can be affected would be indirect exposure. Indirect exposure comes from exposure comes from the consumption of smaller animals who have either come in contact directly with the oil, and then another effect of the oil would be through loss of popular foods. So prey in areas of oil spills, they lose all of their normal, or predators lose all their normal prey, and they will starve that way. So another article by Oceana titled "Impacts of Offshore Drilling" stated that just one rig drills 70 to 80 wells and can release up to 9,000 tons of drilling mud into the ocean. Drilling mud isn't just normal dirt and water. It contains thousands of chemicals that are potentially very harmful to organisms around them. Drilling rigs also produce something called produced water, which contains 30 to 40 parts per million oil and is released in large amounts during the drilling process. So when drilling is a very unnecessary risk to our planet, and it should very much be banned. Even within the last couple months, our president now has proposed more offshore drilling in the Pacific and Gulf Coast regions. Our Gulf Coast has not even close to recovered from the last disaster during the Deepwater Horizon explosion. And our Pacific coast is a habitat for many endangered species. Major disasters from oil rigs can happen decades apart, but the impacts from these events last longer than the attention that the event gets. Ways in which we can positively affect and change oil drilling regulations would be to become educated on the subject, and then when there are bills that are brought up to be voted on, we are educated and can make better decisions onto the subject. Thanks.